I do all sorts of weird and wacky things in the game, such as sacrificing Kerbals into Jewel, turning Bill into paste, and my personal favorite, the Tower. Although through the hundreds of hours I've played this game, I realized something. I hadn't actually visited every body in the Kerbal system. Even with mods like OPM and MPE installed, what's the point of even having these planet packs when I hardly even go to the planets? I think it's about time I fix that. So for that, I'm going to visit every planet from Moho to Soden in the rinky-dinky craft known as the Device. The Device is a tiny craft consisting of an ISV drive and some RCS thrusters, along with a command pod and a vector engine. Obviously, this thing does not have fuel and thus relies on sheets to be able to fly. Because of this, I have set a single rule for myself. I may use infinite propellant and electricity, but I must get to every planet legitimately. This means I cannot teleport into orbit whenever I want, nor can I use mods like Hyperedit or Craft Mover. Even with these clearly overpowered cheats and rules, this should still be a very difficult task. For the sole Kerbal getting a tour of the entire Kerbal system, meet Lutrey. Lutrey is an expert in brain injuries and broken femurs, being well known among the KSC for his comedic nature. And today, Lutrey is going to get a tour of the solar system, starting off with our first destination, the Mun. After being very bad at getting an encounter at the Mun, I eventually get something that looks good. After about a day of waiting in the game, Lutrey finally arrives in Mun orbit, and after a very quick orbital insertion burn, Lutrey begins his descent onto the surface of the Mun. It also just so happened that when I was coming in for a landing, I managed to land pretty close to a base I had made a couple of months earlier. Lutrey is coming in fast, but he can definitely handle something like this, and yeah, I don't know why I'm hyping this up so much. Landing on the Mun is like the easiest thing you could do in the game. Literally no stress, it takes hardly any time, and it is the closest thing to Kerbin. It couldn't be any easier. Lutrey eventually gets out and goes to plant his flag, the first of many. So he carefully inscripts Grog. Eventually, he takes a quick trip to the nearby base, extends an antenna on an old rover before going back to the lander. The craft eventually got up by me demanding it to get up, before eventually it did get up and started spinning in circles for some reason before I turned on SAS again and then launched it into the stratosphere. Wait, the Mun doesn't have an atmosphere. After those shenanigans, I began setting up for an encounter with Minimus and eventually got one. Minimus is just as easy as the Mun, although this time I had to do a bit more setup so I can land in a flatter area. Although then again, it was still pretty easy due to Minimus having basically no gravity. And I also landed the craft as gently as possible just because I could. Got down there, planted the flag, easy as pie. Although Lutrey is a bit more silly with what he wrote down here. Then he got the hell out of there. It was also in Minimus Portal I started finicking to get the ISV working. Shockingly, it works first try. I decided to test it out here, and yep, that works. After being sent down to the abyss, I select Moho as the first target and orient the craft into the direction of Moho. Through the reaction wheels and the RCS, this is pretty easy. Once all this is set up, I go into the map screen and activate the engine. I managed to stop the craft just before colliding with Moho, but I was going at over 23,000 meters per second. So if I didn't go full throttle with the main engine, I would quickly get out of Moho's sphere of influence. After what was probably the most terrifying burn of my life, I eventually got a capture on Moho. After that, it was actually pretty easy. Just a quick 5-minute descent onto the surface of Moho. And I'd actually forgotten, but Parallax added these cool hexagonal structures onto the surface of Moho. Very nice. And Lutrey finally commented on the craft constantly tipping over. After visiting a tower of hexagons, Lutrey began his ascent back into Moho orbit. He also got sight of space-time anomaly before he started making his way to Eve. If you know anything about KSB, you sure know how hard Eve is. Unlike Moho, I came in a lot slower this time, making orbital insertion a heck of a lot easier. After a few orbital adjustments, I began scanning out for places to land. Eventually, I found a good spot on the day side of the planet to land, and after performing an entry burn, Lutrey was on his way to the hardest challenge so far. For Eve entry, I had to come in slowing down so I don't burn up in the atmosphere. Although the severe winds finally got to me, the craft tipped over on its front and began spiraling down towards the surface of the planet. Despite how alarming this looks, I had parachutes, so this wasn't actually that big of a deal. As Lutrey continued his descent, the weird Eve surface blob things came to greet him. Despite the disturbing appearance, this didn't slow Lutrey down, and he still landed anyways. Lutrey got out and went over to plant his flag, but the Eve floor blobs were hungry. Damn it! After doing that again, and carefully and immediately planting my flag, Lutrey wanted to get the hell out of here, and began carefully hopping his way back up into the craft. But due to the craft's funny position, this is going to be the first of many attempts to get off the surface of the planet. So I'm just going to spare you through the suffering I went through. Shockingly, on only the third try, I managed to get off the surface of the planet and began making my way up into the atmosphere, with only losing one of the ladders. I had to make sure I wasn't ascending too fast or else I'd burn alive. After that nerve-wracking ascent, I began making my way out of Eve orbit and over to Gilly. This took way longer than it needed to due to Gilly's small gravitational influence. Eventually, I set up for a good encounter and then started making my way over to Gilly. Do I even need to show what happens next? I landed on the moon with just RCS. Not even with the main engine. It was just super easy. Silly Gilly. No, it freaking isn't. Then proceeded probably the quickest ascent I have ever seen. Then I began angling myself for Duna, our next target. And I also got a really cinematic shot of burning into Duna orbit. Just look at this thing! Then I began to perform an orbital insertion around Duna. But whoopsie me, I forgot to press the record button when I was actually landing on the planet, so I only got a small portion of the descent. What? Record buttons or not, I managed to still land on the planet regardless. Lutrey got out, repacked the parachutes, and went to go plant his flag. And he's a firm believer that aliens exist on Duna, and the lack of such aliens really disappointed him. Ignoring the weird surface blobs, he decided to get back into his craft. He then began to lift his way off the planet, at extremely high speeds. After adjusting my orbit, I began setting up for an encounter with Ike. Due to its enormous size, this was very easy. After arriving and quickly capturing myself into orbit, I began a sharp descent as a bit of a challenge for myself. Eventually, I found a nice spot to land on, but decided to readjust it due to its unnatural terrain and its distance from some crystals I wanted to visit. And eventually, I found a nice spot to land on close to 2 massive crystals. Lutrey got out and made his way to one of the taller crystals so he can plant his flag there. And after picking an absolute badass position to plant his flag, commented on how cool and amazing and large these crystals were, like wall. Eventually his time on Ike came to an end and he began to ascend. Eventually it became time for us to go to our next planet, 433 EDAS. The first modded object in this tour of the Kerbal system. I thought it wouldn't be that hard to get to an asteroid that is really tiny. This was a huge mistake, as EDAS's gravitational field is so tiny that it couldn't get me captured even if I warped directly into the planet. And it took me 10 minutes to get into an orbital burn that is good enough to get an intercept with the planet's gravitational influence. Eventually I arrived at the tiny space rock. Due to its lack of gravity, actually getting onto the surface was really easy. Lutrey eventually got out of the craft and started making his way to the surface so he can actually plant the flag on this tiny asteroid, and joking about its lack of gravity. Before beginning his ascent off the surface of the asteroid. Very quickly. Eventually, I began setting up for our next target, Vant. Another modded object, and it's an analog of Vesta. I had a lot easier of a time getting to Vant due to its slightly larger gravitational influence. Eventually, Lutrey began making his way down to the surface of the asteroid, which rapidly changed colors for some reason before shifting back to its original color. Eventually, Lutrey landed on the weirdly symmetrical surface, got out, and planted a flag, and questioned the similarities between this asteroid and Dress. Eventually, he got back onto his craft and took off, back into orbit. This is where Lutrey is on his crusade across the solar system. But why Lutrey of all Kerbals? Why not Jeb, Bill, or Bob? The USSK recruited Lutrey for unspecified reasons. But after some Kerbals dug through some documents, they found something. Lutrey was visiting the planets for a reason. There was something on one of the planets, but who knows what it is. But that doesn't answer the question. Why Lutrey? Why Lutrey of all Kerbals? Well, allegedly, they found something with him. They found he had a special quality or trait of some kind. Who knows what that is? Regardless, it's far too late to stop his journey now. He's on his way from Moho to Soden, and there's nothing slowing him down. Who knows what he'll find on his journey out to Soden.